Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our second Innovation Masterclass for this session. We're delighted for you to be joining us. And just with last time that we did one, we have a hybrid event. So we actually have a live studio audience with us. Say hello, everyone. Wave to camera. They are here with us, which is fantastic. And then we have people joining us also live on YouTube. So we're delighted for you to be joining us. Thank you ever so much. Hopefully you enjoyed the last session that we had. That was with Mark Logan, who did a fantastic session about business startups. And we hope you'll enjoy this one just as much. So my name's Chris Mould. I'm the Head of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Robert Gordon University. And our aim is to foster and inspire entrepreneurship. And the Innovation Masterclasses are part of that. We've run accelerator programs, we do Innovation Masterclasses, we do skills programs. And we've supported, through the accelerator, 62 startup businesses, which has been fantastic. And we're looking to do more work with those entrepreneurs as well. So we've got an amazing event for you tonight, which we're really looking forward to entertaining you with. And one of the things that we want to do with these Innovation Masterclasses was to inspire people, to build that curiosity, to get people to think outside the box. And we didn't just want to do business people or technology people. We wanted to make sure that we covered the performing arts or sport or health. And we have that for you tonight. So we have some amazing, inspiring speakers that are going to share their stories with you tonight to entertain and inspire you. Now, when I was a little boy, there were 4 things that I wanted to achieve in my life. The first one was I wanted to go into space. I wanted to go to the moon. Most young boys at some time wanted to be a spaceman. The second was that I wanted to score the winning goal in the FA Cup final for Liverpool. And I'm still hoping that maybe one day I will be able to achieve that. The third one was to win a gold medal. And I really wanted to do that. Some kind of sport, I wanted to win a gold medal. And the fourth one was to get in the Guinness Book of Records. So there were 4 things that I wanted to achieve, and those of a certain vintage, and you know who you are, will remember record breakers. Going home after school and watching record breakers with Roy Castle and Noyce McWhirter, and that was what inspired me to try and get in the record books. But I didn't achieve it. But today, in the room, I'm joined by two people that have achieved two of those things. And I'm going to ask Ewan whether maybe you've either gone into space or scored a goal in the FA Cup final. No, okay. So, without further ado, I want to introduce you to our first speakers. So, good friends of RGU, Ewan Duff and Hannah Miley. So, Ewan was actually a graduate. I think he graduated in 2012 in architecture. That's right. And he's led a successful career in video production. And he actually attended our second cohort of the Accelerator program with his company Ampler, which is going to speak to you about, with his co-founder, Hannah Miley. Now, Hannah will be recognised to a number of you because she's Scotland's best female swimmer, qualifying for multiple Olympic Games and winning gold in Commonwealth Games in 2010 and 2014. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to Ewan and Hannah.
Much. Firstly, Josh, congratulations. We're both massive sports fans, and what you've done is absolutely amazing. So great achievement. I can't wait to hear what you've got to say this afternoon. Most of you might, possibly a lot of you have possibly moved house. Me and Hannah moved house a month ago, and it was a very daunting, very challenging time. And it wasn't until I moved house I realised how much waste we produce. We live in Blackburn, and you only get recycling once every 2 weeks, which is a bit of a change from Aberdeen City. And as we started moving, my dad was actually up and we were trying to cram as much recycling into the rubbish bin, but realised we actually started putting some of the recycling in the rubbish bin to try and get it away. And it started me thinking, we throw so much away, rubbish, recycling, everything like this. I wondered, what happens to all this waste? Then it actually got me thinking, we don't actually recycle humans. And everyone's sitting here thinking, whoa, what are you on about? My dad, who was up, is about to retire, and he's 60, and he spent all of his life learning. And he was saying, I was in for, early retirement in 2 years' time, but there's nobody there to learn from. So when he leaves, all the knowledge goes, and everything goes with him. There's no protocol. So I was like, well, why couldn't we recycle you? Why can't we put you on a program that would take you? People who come in and learn, be able to take your experience and learn it. And then it got me thinking, my lovely fiancée here, Hannah, take that 60 years and compress it down. She spent 30 years in her trade, and probably you were lucky, but most athletes get about 5 years at the peak. They probably get one Olympic cycle. To make a second Olympics is really difficult. To make 3 Olympics is absolutely amazing, and to miss out on just a 4th is even better. But take that, so everybody in here that's been to university, imagine if you came out of university, got to the end of your degree, worked for 4 years, and someone came up, right, Ross, you've worked for 4 years' time, it's time for you to retire. But there's going to be nothing for you. There's going to be no help. You're going to be unemployed, and the skill set that you have is not now redundant. That kind of got me worrying because obviously I want to be able to provide for my family, but also I want Hannah to be able to have a career of her own. And she was with a great management company, but at the time it was very traditional. It was, I actually met you in the swimming pool next door, which is really ironic. And it was, this is Hannah Miley, she's an Olympian. And I was like, well, that's really good. But the more I get to know you, the more I see, I realise it's like selling a car. If someone came up to you and was like, this is the best car ever, it's a Mercedes, buy it. I was like, I want to know a little bit more. And that's where Ampler comes in. What we want to do is transform athletes into something that will be a longer career for them. So when they come to the end of the career, they have something else to look forward to. If I was to stand up and say, I want you to sponsor Hannah, she's a great swimmer, give her money, you'd probably be like, I don't know if I really want her. But maybe you do. But if I came up and said, this is Hannah, she has a fantastic business called Find the Flow, which helps educate women and men on the menstruation cycle. And we want you to invest in Hannah and become part of her journey and part of her business. Suddenly, people would then get something back in return, and suddenly Hannah becomes more valuable. At the end of her career, when that comes, we want to be able to give her a stepping stone to be able to move on. So what we want to do is create a brand. So when you get to the end of your career, there's not much to go forward to. You finish and then you have to find something else. But if we can create something that it doesn't dictate on success. So if Hannah was to win gold, bronze, silver, or not even make the event, she has something to fall back on and has something of value. And that's what we do. We create the brand and then we create something for Hannah. Whether she attends the part of the business or not, it can still make her revenue. So when she comes to retire, this is hypothetically and fingers crossed, we will have a business up and running for her that I'll be like, don't worry, the business is generating income. We have these people out educating females, males on menstruation. Let's go to Barbados for 4 weeks and everything's paid for. That is the journey that we want the athlete to take. So when they come to retire, they're not suddenly, how am I going to afford my rent? How am I going to afford this? What do I actually do? Because all the sports people know, when you get to the end of it, you don't actually know what you want to do. You need that time to be able to process and to run through it. And that's where we are at. We have started up Hannah's business. We are developing the brand and we have actually started doing some pilot. So Hannah is still swimming, which is great. But we have a mentoring service where she's now helping a lot of young girls, which is actually the really great thing, overcome with COVID, like confidence, anxiety. So she speaks to them like a Zoom class. Meg goes on, talks to them, makes sure, reassures them, talks her through. I've been there, don't worry, I've done that. I know exactly how you feel. It's going to be okay. We have Find the Flow, which we are now working with corporates, we're working with commercials, and we're now about to go into the education sector to be able to deliver these for very low cost, if not free, which counterbalances off the commercial, so we can go out, educate everybody, male and female, about how you understand the female cycle, how we support it, how we bring it into the world, and how we make it actually good. And then obviously we'll have the masterclasses, which Hannah, it would be silly not to, she swam for 30 years. She's possibly one of the very most decorated female swimmers there is. So what we want to do is create a platform so she can go out there, educate people, coach people, teach people, and leave a legacy that will then allow people to understand there's more value to these people. So if we drop her, if we don't fund her, if we let her disappear, the knowledge, the education, and the potential disappears. And I guess that's, for me, is the final bit, is everybody has the potential to do something great. But if you do not support it, if you do not mentor it, if you do not help it, it never goes past being just an idea. So that's every athlete that comes in, we help build the brand that is so different to each other. I'll never have an athlete competing against another athlete within my management company. So I can have 50 female athletes who all have different businesses that will never compete against each other, which means I can ensure that every athlete is supported in a different way. And with that, the potential of every athlete is great. We could change every athlete's experience, every athlete's journey, to make sure that when they come to the end of their sport, they can be happy and they can move on to life and hopefully have successful businesses. Thank you very much. On you go.
Yeah. Yes. So I graduated in 2013. I guess whenever I introduce myself, I always feel I have to use the accolades. Hi, I'm Hannah Miley. I'm a triple Olympian, a quadruple Commonwealth athlete, and it kind of goes on. And it sounds really impressive and amazing. But what Ewan's business and Ampla has been really helpful for is allowing that I'm more than just the medals. I'm more than just the athlete. There's more to me. So with my previous management company, I was actually asked to describe myself without using the accolades. And it was actually very, very difficult. I eventually came to the conclusion that I'm a full-time body movement enthusiast, part-time puppy trainer. Those are the two main things I'm really interested in. I love body movement. I love exercise, and not just in swimming, land movement, Pilates, yoga, CrossFit, just how the body moves. I'm hugely fascinated by it. But I also love working with my dog. She's amazing and she's taught me so much as well. So there's a personality behind each of the athletes. And as we go into the current generation, everything's online. Like even today, we're part, hybrid. And we have a lot of influence through social media. And I'm still trying to get my head around it and learn a little bit more about it. You can look at a profile and think, wow, they've got like 100,000 followers. Why has this person got 500 followers, but I really like their content? And it still baffles me to this day, but it seems to be the more followers you have, the more opportunities you have. But as an athlete, I guess you kind of have to fight against those that have bigger followings, because people are going to want to sponsor those with bigger followings, because then their products are going to get more growth and more a bigger audience. So I'm trying to kind of say in a roundabout sort of way is trying to set yourself up out with the sporting world has been incredibly difficult and challenging. And I love my sporting bubble. I've wanted to stay in it. And one of the benefits of having a company like Ampla come along is that I can still continue my training, still stay involved in the bubble, not have to worry too much about social media. I mean, I'm 32, so I do have to worry about the real world at some point. I have a mortgage. But to know that there is something there as a safety net taken over just gives you that peace of mind. It takes that weight off your shoulders, which is hugely beneficial and helpful. And when my career does come to an end, my self-worth will still stay with me because I have something that I can jump into, that I can still put that determination, routine, everything that I gave into my sport into something new. And it doesn't mean that I fade away or fade into a distance or feel like I have to try and find a way to keep myself current, because my current business will be there for me. Yeah, I'm probably going to start waffling on a little bit, so I'll leave it there, but kind of open the floor for any questions, I think, isn't it? Or that was it at the end. No worries, but thank you.
Thank you very much, that's fantastic. And if people want to find out more, or that's going to fall off. Spot that back there. Thank you. If people want to find out more or interested in supporting Ampla, the website, are you just going through a web development just now? Yeah. Right. Okay. So if they're going to Instagram, look for Ampla or Ewan Duff. Ampla Agency. Okay. Excellent. So any funded? Miley. Miley. That's what you do. I've got you. But shameless plug. So if any sponsors or anyone, any corporate people that want to get involved, then certainly. And we've been working with Ewan and Hannah for a while now, and fantastic. I mean, one of the things you're trying to do is kind of disrupt a little bit. There's nothing like it out there just now. So trying to disrupt the industry, the kind of agency industry as well. So you're kind of thinking slightly outside of the box, so which is fantastic. And so if you get an opportunity to go and have a look at what it is they're doing, then do so. An opportunity to support them. If you want to get in touch with Ewan or Hannah, then you can do that. And we're very proud of both of them because they're both RGU graduates as well, which is great. Entrepreneurial graduates, which is brilliant. So I'm now going to hand over to my friend and colleague, Danella Beaton, the Vice Principal for Economic Development, who is going to introduce our keynote speaker. Thank you, Danella.
My goodness, there's so many things to think about when you stand up now by the time you take your mask off and everything else. But, before I introduce our speaker for tonight, can I just really congratulate Ewan and Hannah on their work that they've done on their project and their business, because I think we're all agree in the room here, and I'm sure online, it sounds really, really exciting. I look forward to seeing what's happening with it over the years to come. So all the very, very best. And for me, it was a bit daunting standing up here tonight between two really fantastic athletes. And as much as I would like to say there's something in there, there really isn't. But also, I think what's also daunting for me tonight is standing up between three excellent speakers. So Ewan, I'm including you in that one as well, because honestly, really that was quite inspiring. But I'm here really just to introduce our next speaker to you, and welcome to the second of the 21-22 masterclasses here at RGU. I learnt a new Doric phrase at the weekend, which is fair tricket. And I can say that I'm fair tricket to be here tonight to introduce Josh Quiqley as tonight's speaker. If he needs any introduction, that is. Josh is an ultra-endurance athlete who has just earned a Guinness World Record for the greatest distance cycled in 1 week. And I deliberately took my notes because I know I will get the numbers wrong if I don't read them. Josh has cycled an astonishing 2,179.66 miles around Aberdeenshire in a week. And that is the equivalent, for those of you who are exactly. And in case any of you are trying to do the maths, I used my calculator before I came, but that is the average of 320 miles a day. I mean, that is just awesome. And for 7 consecutive days. Josh had previously set a record for the fastest time to complete the North Coast 500 route, and that's 516 miles, and he did that in 31 hours. Now, many people, I think, living along the route would say that's probably the time it takes most people to do 1 mile. So to do the whole journey in that time, that's truly staggering. Despite his cycling achievements, he's had a pretty tricky time along the years, and his inspiring story also includes in 2019 when in Texas he suffered some life-threatening injuries, which included, and again need to read this one, a fractured skull, pelvis, 10 broken ribs and a punctured lung when he was hit by a car travelling at 70 miles per hour. And actually the fact he ever got back on a bike at all is kind of staggering, I think, to most of us. I was going to say normal people, but that's not really the thing I should say. And then in February this year, he fractured his spine, his pelvis in 2 places, broke his elbow, his shoulder, and 4 ribs. And that was just 3 months, just short of 3 months before he actually set his world record. So I just wanted to provide you with that context before he actually speaks tonight. But Josh is not just that cyclist that we all hold in awe. In 2015, he won Young Entrepreneur of the Year with his digital marketing business Shark Dog, and later, following a spell of depression, launched the Tartan Explorer to inspire others through undertaking challenges and fundraising for charity, creating content for social media and speaking to schools and audience. Over 33,000 people now follow his activities on LinkedIn, and he continues to push boundaries and records through his superhuman feats of endurance. And I'm absolutely honoured and fair-tricked, Josh, to introduce you and to welcome you up to the stage tonight. Thank you.
Without the mic, anyway, can't we? Great. First of all, I just want to say thanks to you guys. That was great. I can definitely relate to that thing about, identity. I've been through that in my journey as well. And, you do get so caught up in, who you are and what you do. And I'm definitely still at that stage right now where my entire identity is wrapped up in that. And I'm just milking this moment. But I think there may become a time when I need to kind of step away from the world record. And thanks also to you, Ewan, as well, for your comments about athletes as well. My journey in my life has basically had 2 parts. The first part was growing up and being an entrepreneur, and the second part was being a cyclist and an athlete. And when I tell the story, I always tell it in those 2 parts. But there really was never really 2 parts. It was always just one part. Like, even as a cyclist, I was always an entrepreneur as well. And I think one of the reasons why I've been able to become a full-time professional athlete isn't because I was the greatest athlete. It was because I knew and understood business and marketing as well. And it's something that a lot of athletes and cyclists and anybody involved in any sport is one of the things that they don't think about. And I always had that because of my background. So thanks for that, and the work you guys are doing is really great. My name's Josh Quiqley, and I'm here today to speak to you a little bit. Well, the question up there is how to become superhuman. Before you try and answer that question, I think you have to first try and define superhuman. It's a word that's always meant a lot to me. When I done my round the world cycle in 2019, I used to say it all the time. I used to say it in my videos, I used to write it in my blogs, I used to hashtag it. I don't even know why I'd done it, but I used to say it and say it and say it and say it and say it. And sometimes I think you become the things you say the most, and you become the things you think you are. and to go and ride over 2,000 miles in a week is pretty superhuman. It's up there with the endurance challenges of this world, and I think it just came largely from self-belief and from just always thinking and believing in myself. But to me, superhuman has always meant two things. The first thing, I think, to be superhuman is to go and do things that people would say are impossible and that have never been done before. The other side of that, I would say, is to overcome things that people would say you couldn't overcome. So it's the positive and the negative. How can we achieve things that have never been done before? Really big, amazing things. And also, how can we overcome all the negative and difficult and adverse things that we go through in our lives? And that's something that's right throughout my entire journey. So to try and answer that question, I really need to take you back to the beginning, where it all began for me. I've always been a dreamer. My entire life, I've just always been the sort of guy that had dreams and goals, and they've always been the biggest possible dreams and goals they could have been. When I was 10 years old, my dad gave me Richard Branson's autobiography. I read that book cover to cover and said, that's what I'm going to be when I grow up. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. My dad had been in business, he'd worked in the bank, I'd always been inspired by him, so that was the path that I wanted to go on, and that was my dream when I was a wee boy. Like most entrepreneurs, I've got all the stories of high school businesses, tuck shop empires. Mine, my high school business was selling cans of iron brew to my mates in school. We had a vending machine in our cafeteria where it was 70 pence for a can of iron brew. So I'd get my mum to take me down to Lidl and buy the 24 pack that clearly said in it, not for individual resale. I would carry them up to school in my backpack and sell them to my mates for 50 pence, 20 pence cheaper, a wee profit for me. I was in business. I then diversified, started selling sweets, drumstick lollies, started eating my profits, so kind of just quickly left them behind. But that was sort of the kid I was, I was always going to be an entrepreneur. I was always going to follow my own path. Like, I was never cut out to have a real job or work for somebody. I just didn't have that in me. And so eventually I leave school and I go off to university because I never really had an idea for a business. And so I just went to study business until that time came. I was lucky in my third year of that degree. I had an opportunity to do a project with a company, and I was doing all their social media and digital marketing basically. Off the back of that, the guy that ran the company, me and him decided to start a business together. And so he essentially became an investor. I had 75%, he had 25%. He invested in the business and we started off. He went away out to California in business and just said, basically, build and grow this business, and he was just a sort of silent partner trying to mentor me. Came up with a name for the business, it was called Shark Dog. Managed to create this crazy brand story about how the shark met the dog, and got a nice website and all that. And so basically, this was over the summer in between my third year and my fourth year at university. And by the time it was time to go back for my fourth and final year, had the business, had our own office, had 2 staff, an ever-growing client portfolio. I was taking trips down to London. I was just living the dream, It was an early stage business. I wasn't making any money. There was no profit yet. But in terms of that wee boy that was 10 years old and said I want to be an entrepreneur, I was well and truly living the dream. I was running a business and I was living the life. That went on for 6 months and I was just having the time of my life. And then Christmas 2014, my long-term girlfriend and I broke up. We've been together for quite a long time, about 7 or 8 years. Just found that difficult, wasn't really emotionally ready for that. I was only 22 at the time and just plunged into quite a deep and dark depression, which lasted for about 6 months. At the end of that 6 months, I didn't feel any better than I did at the start and couldn't imagine ever coming through it. So I basically decided to take my own life. I've been thinking about it every day in that 6 month period and had an idea for it. And one night, 26th of May, 2015, just woke up and thought, this is it, it's time to do it. And went out, done it. I'll not go too deep into the details of that. But I basically attempted to take my own life and was very lucky to survive. I was admitted to hospital in Edinburgh, and about 24 hours after that I was released free to go and got up out of my bed, walked along to the chapel. Never been a guy that was religious, never been spiritual. I was just a guy that was building a business and living for the weekend really, just loved going out with my mates, loved drinking, loved going to the pub, or during the week building my business. So I wasn't exactly a spiritual guy, but sitting in the chapel that night, I wrote a wee message in the book, which basically thanked a God I never believed in and said, I'm going to go and change my life and do something different. I never really knew what to do, and in the few months after that, I kind of just kept drinking, kept working in the business because I didn't know what else to do. It was just all I'd ever known. Because of the business I had, I got along to a lot of events, business network and stuff like that. I was along at an event in Edinburgh about 5 months after the incident, and Chris Hoy was speaking that day. That was it. I obviously knew who Sir Chris Hoy was, but as a guy that wasn't sporty, wasn't athletic, was in the pub 4 nights a week, didn't go to the gym, eating junk food, takeaways, diet was terrible. Sitting in the audience that day, I was just so inspired by Sir Chris Hoy, and I don't know what it was specifically about his talk or his achievements or what he was talking about that day, but just something awoke within me that day, and I remember just thinking, I need to get on a bike. And sitting there that day, I just said, fuck it, I'm going to cycle around the world. Sorry, that bit's a wee bit difficult for me to say because I've been in schools for the last 2 weeks, so I'm used to rephrasing it. It's the first time I've spoke to adults in so long, so I'm used to saying the clean version, but that's basically what I said that day in the audience. I said, I'm going to go and cycle around the world. The interesting thing about that moment is, you can delve into so much of who I am and my psychology as a person, because I never sat there that day and said, I need to get a bike, I'm going to do 2 mornings a week, I'm going to do a coast to coast, I'm going to do Land's End Johnny Groats. I said, I'm going to cycle around the world. It was the biggest possible version of cycling at that time. I wasn't at a level where I could have competed or raced or done anything like that. So cycling around the world was the biggest thing I could have done, and everything I've ever done in my life has to be the biggest, best thing it could be, and it's always got to be the biggest dream. So I set myself that goal, and 6 months later, I'd left the business, signed it over to my business partner, and set off to try and cycle around the world. I never done it because cycling around the world was my dream. I really just wanted to be happy. I was just depressed, miserable, hating my life in Scotland, struggling in the environment I grew up in, a wee village just outside Edinburgh in Livingston. Grew up with a group of mates that I loved, like brothers and sisters, but all we'd done was just go to the pub and drink, and it's hard to have that conversation with them that, I just don't want to drink anymore, I can't do this, it's going to cost me my life. And I knew I had to try and be sober, and so cycling around the world was the perfect goal, the perfect challenge and the perfect solution, because it got me out of Scotland and it gave me a big challenge to focus on. So I set off, no plan, no clue, just trying to get as far away from Scotland as I could, head to Dover, get the boat across to France. Long story short, I spent 1 year cycling around Europe, done about 10,000 miles, 14 countries, doing about 50 miles a day, camping in the tent at night or being hosted by families for couch surfing, reading loads of books, meditating, seeing Europe, just the adventure of a lifetime. To go and travel around Europe on a bicycle in your early 20s, it's magical. It was just an incredible life experience, and so you can imagine at the end of that year, I'm the happiest, healthiest, fittest I've ever been. I'm just loving life. My lifestyle took a radical transformation from the guy that was in Scotland, going to the pub, drinking, no exercising, to, on the bike, eating well, meeting all these amazing people. It was just an incredible transformation. So, I never wanted to cycle around the world. I was happy and I felt like I'd sort of achieved my goal. So I said, I'll just quit and go back. Genuinely thought I'd never be on a bike ever again. Went home to Scotland, and initially the first few weeks I'm back, loving life, great to see my mates, great to see the family, great to just be back in Scotland and feeling happy because it's been so long since that had happened. But very quickly, back in the old environment, it's so easy to slip into the old habits and old behaviours, Then they go on the bike, back in the pub, drinking again, very quickly I'm back in a hole, depressed again. And, big lesson in that moment where you realise that, my habits, my lifestyle, my choices are ultimately going to determine how I feel. Being away in Europe helps, but also if I'm not putting in the work to look after my health and well-being, I'm going to struggle. So that started a really dodgy kind of 18-month period for me. I basically just kept getting back on the bike and trying to cycle around the world again, and something kept bringing me home and kept trying it again. And a lot of people have different coping mechanisms for how they feel. Some people, if they don't like how they feel, will go to the pub, they'll drink, go and watch something on Netflix, get a takeaway. Mine became get on a bike and try and cycle around the world. That's just the character I am. Everything's just so extreme. And so anytime I had a wee wobble or started to feel bad, I would just get on the bike and I'd go and try and do it again. Most of those attempts were a week, 2 weeks at the most. I just wasn't mentally stable at the time, so I didn't get very far. I basically had 5 or 6 attempts at trying to cycle around the world, and 5 or 6 times I'd never done it. Eventually, managed to get quite settled in Scotland, you know, doing what I'm doing with you guys this evening, you know, working as a public speaker. I was working in schools, giving talks for the kids, you know, high schools, colleges, universities, a lot of corporates, businesses, conferences, events, stuff like that. And I was actually quite settled, loving life, and I was basically just telling the story from everything I told you from the beginning up until that point. And I thought that was my story. I thought I was a guy that grew up with a dream of being a businessman, depressed, suicide attempt, tried to cycle around the world, got happy, came home and shared the journey and tried to inspire other people. I thought that was the story. I never realised there's a few more chapters in store. 2018, as I'm working as a speaker, my dad gets diagnosed with leukemia. That was quite difficult. He passed away at the end of 2018. Anybody who's lost a parent or loved one, you know what that's like. And you know, started 2019, I'm back in a bit of depression again, and once again back in the bike. Have another attempt to try to do around the world. Again, something stops me, I come back, have another one. On one of those attempts that started 2019, I cycled from Edinburgh down to Dover, got the boat across to France. Thought, right, come on, this is it, let's go. Istanbul, get across Europe. No, I can't do it. Got the boat back. Stayed in Dover that night, just planning going up the road. Woke up the following morning and said, no, come on, you can do this. Got the boat back to France, get over. As I get to France, I go, no, I can't do this. I get the boat back. I was basically just getting the boat between Dover and Calais back and forward. 4 times I got it in the space of 2 days. And that's just the sort of place that I was in my life, how mentally unstable I was, and how unsure I was as well. I was so scared of that cycle. I get to a point in April 2019, and I have a bit of a man in the mirror moment. For the last 18 months to 2 years, I've just been all over the place, you know, so many different challenges, different ideas. You know, I'd been volunteering out in Italy, just doing so many different things, and just everything I'd done, I'd start it and I wouldn't finish it. And I thought, you need to just go and finish something. You need to pick one thing, commit to it, go and finish it just to prove you can do it, because you can't keep living your life this way. And so, what was that thing going to be? I tried to cycle around the world 6 times. 6 times I came home having not done it. There was only ever going to be one thing. It was time to cycle around the world. So I got on that bike for what at the time I thought was the 7th and final time. And I'm thinking, go cycle around the world, finish it, get the chapter of the book, and then just tell that story for the rest of your life. That's what I'm thinking in my head. So I get on the bike for that 7th time, and I'd done something that I'd never done before in any of the previous attempts, which was, I made a commitment to cycling around the world, and I said, I'm not going to stop until I finish. Doesn't matter what happens along the way, doesn't matter what obstacles I experience, I'm going to finish cycling around the world. From that point, leaving Edinburgh, I never really looked back. That was 2.5 years ago, and I've still not looked back. There's been one thing in my life, which has been cycling, and I've been relentless on that journey in the last 2.5 years. I left Edinburgh, you know, 6 days later I'm in London. 5-6 weeks later I'm in Istanbul, I've got across Europe. 4 or 5 months later I make it to Tokyo. Another 3 weeks after that I get across Australia. I finally get to the point where 7 or 8 months after leaving Scotland, flying into America, coming into California, I can see the Hollywood sign, and I'm like, this is it. All I need to do is cycle Los Angeles to New York, and I've finished cycling around the world. So, setting off with Los Angeles, I'm in good spirits. I'm on track to finish cycling around the world in 8 months. In that time, on that journey, you know, when I started out in all the earlier attempts, I'm doing 50 miles a day, bike packing, you know, quite leisurely, stopping for lunch along the way. By the end of that, you know, I'm doing 200 miles a day. I'm doing a day that's 270 miles, 240. I'm doing like 180, 190, 170, 200, all those sort of days back to back. You know, the journey I went on that year was just the growth from just having one thing, not stopping and starting all the time. And so by the end, I'm really hammering it, and I'm trying to get home for Christmas. I makes it about 1,000 miles across America, and there's a great saying which is, don't mess with Texas. I messed with Texas. I messed with Texas. I was on a highway one night, Highway 36, and the last thing I can remember is just riding along Highway 36, trying to get to the town. I was about 20 miles away from my 200 mile a day target at that time. And the next thing I can remember, I was in a helicopter. So I wasn't in any pain, you know, I couldn't feel anything wrong with my body, but I knew that there's something that went wrong because I was in a helicopter. You know, something went wrong on this cycle, you know, I should just be on the road. Long story short, you know, I'd been hit by a car. The car had been travelling 70 mile an hour, hit me from behind, I flew 50 feet through the air, hit the ground, emergency services arrived and took me to hospital. I had a long list of injuries, most of which you covered earlier, pretty much in every part of my body. But somehow I was alive, and something that I'm really proud of is that when I woke up in the hospital the following morning, I had my first real kind of conscious moment waking up with all those injuries and knowing what had happened to me. My first thought was, when can I get back on the bike? Because I've got a challenge to finish and I need to finish cycling around the world. And the same guy that 8 months earlier got the boat between Dover and Calais 4 times because he was so scared of that round the world was the same guy that woke up in that hospital with all those injuries and said, when can I get back on the bike? That was the journey that I went on in 2019. I always wondered what part of me wanted to cycle around the world, and I always wondered what part of me stopped me. There was definitely a fear. The journey that I went on in 2019 was from being a guy that was lost, depressed, unsure, not really sure what to do with his life, to the end of that, knowing exactly who I am and what I'm going to do in my life. Like, I was born to ride a bike, and that was why I was so called to do that challenge, and that was why I was also stopped it so many times, because I was scared of becoming what I was supposed to be, and I truly believe that. And with that mindset and that attitude and that commitment to cycling, I sailed through the rehabilitation. 12 weeks after that crash, I was fully rehabilitated, back on the bike and ready to go to America and finish cycling around the world. But that was also March 2020. I wasn't going anywhere. None of us were going anywhere. COVID had other plans for us all, so I just continued to train. I never really knew how serious it was, like us all, because we're all still wearing masks now, almost 2 years later. I thought I'll get back to America in the summer maybe, so I just kept training, and by the summer that year I got into the shape of my life. I was just absolutely flying. I needed a new goal. Somebody said, why didn't you go and try and set the North Coast 500 record? So long story short, again, we went up to Inverness and had a wee team of people, and we basically tried to break that record. It was originally done in 38 hours by Mark Beaumont, who held the round the world record, and then James McCallum, who was a professional cyclist, took it down to 31 hours 23. So we're up against two of the greatest cyclists that Scotland's ever produced, and I was just the crazy guy on a bike at this time. But I believed I could do it, and I believed it was my time, and it was time to go and join the elites and get my first record. We managed to get it done, and we've done it in 31 hours and 19 minutes, so we beat the record by 4 minutes, which means that if I went 8 seconds slower each hour, I wouldn't have done it. So talk about marginal gains. But that was the greatest moment. Even everything that's happened this year, that was still the greatest single standalone moment in my life. Like riding at Inverness Castle, hundreds of people there coming out to follow and support. I'd got on a bike a few years before because I was depressed. Like, I wasn't supposed to ride into that castle as a record breaker. I was never supposed to do that. Or was I? Maybe I was. But for me, if you take me back to 2015, getting into cycling, if you to say to me that in a few years' time, I'd be breaking records and have an official Guinness World Record for the most miles in a week, I'd have said you were the crazy one, not me. But that's the journey that I went on, and I truly believe I was always supposed to go on that journey, and all the negative, difficult, adverse moments that happened, they were all supposed to happen to get me to where I am now. And so, in the last year, since that North Coast 500 record, this has essentially been my life and my challenge. I had another big crash in January this year. I was out in Dubai doing winter training and crashed, basically coming down a descent about 40 mile an hour. My first thought when I hit the tarmac was, I'm done. Like, I'm never getting on a bike ever again. It was a total opposite experience in America. In America I woke up like, when can I get back on the bike? So determined. But that crash in Dubai was pretty traumatic, and I wasn't really enjoying my cycling at the time. And as soon as it happened, I thought, I'll never get back on a bike ever again. But then, I'm in hospital, another long list of injuries, broken arm, elbow, shoulder, spine, pelvis and stuff again. I'm lying in the hospital bed, and I'm thinking to myself, what the hell am I going to do in my life? Like, I couldn't even think of like one thing that I was going to do next. Like, cycling just become such a big thing for me in the last couple of years. And I remember sitting in my bed thinking, imagine how cool it'd be if I came back with 2 crashes in 2 years and set 2 world records. That's a cool story. And from that point, I've just been relentless in going forward. And so I got back on the bike, rehabilitated all those injuries again in March this year. Was looking for a new challenge. Couldn't really go anywhere because of COVID and the restrictions. So, you know, I'd always known about the 7-day record. It was time to go for it. Had our first attempt, failed, knee injury meant I had to pull out on day 5. It was a really painful experience, but got through it and, you know, managed to get fit back on the bike once again and got a new date in place for the 13th to the 20th of September. Another long story short, but we managed to get it done. 2,179 miles, which meant we beat the previous record by 2 miles. Close. That's how I like to take my records, apparently. Would have liked to have done more, but the sleep deprivation was just so hard. And basically, my mindset going into the second one was just get through the first 5 days, because I had to pull out basically in day 4 or 5 the last time with the knee injury. I thought, if I can get through the first 5 days, wake up on the Saturday morning, still in the race, no knee issues, there or thereabout for the record, I'll do it. And so I woke up on the Saturday, got to bed at like 5, 6 in the morning, because that's how long the Friday ride took. Had maybe an hour or 2 in bed, and 9 o'clock in the morning I'm setting off. I've got 43 hours to the end, and I know that if my Garmin says 635 miles, I'll break the record by a mile. So project 635 was basically just the final weekend. 637 it came in it, we got there, and we got it done, and yeah, we got this nice shiny Guinness World Record. Wasn't easy, but I'm glad I persevered, and that's basically the story up until this point. I'm sure we'll jump into questions and stuff like that. But yeah, it's not been easy to get here. There's been a lot of difficult, painful moments, a few moments that I've wanted to quit, but managed to somehow stay in the race, and I'm still here, still going, and not even warmed up yet. Like, I've got so much more in me, and in terms of where I go from here, going forward, I've always been a dreamer, always had big dreams, always had big goals. There's never, ever, ever been a Scottish winner of the Tour de France. And I know how big it is, and I know how crazy it is, but that's my dream. That is my dream. And the thing I love about dreams is that they take you a lot further than you would have went without them, because what they force you to do is to look after your actions, what you need to do day to day. How do I need to train? How do I need to eat? What team do I need around me? What environment do I need to be in? What books do I need to read? And so that, for me, is the process over the next 5 years to 2026. 2.5 years ago, I was struggling to do 50 miles, 9, 10 mile an hour. Here I am now, as that guy. So the question for me now is, where's that guy going to be in 5 years? If it's not riding down the Champs-Élysées in yellow, then I don't know. So that's my dream. Everybody will say it's impossible, but I'm going to give it my best shot. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josh. I think you could hear a pin drop there. Could you sit in that one?
Oh,
Because
sorry.
You'll be on the camera
Yeah.
a bit more, and probably people want to see you more than they want to see me. I think that was, you could hear a pin drop in here. I don't know if anybody else, but that was amazing. I think everybody was hanging on your every word, and we're going to have some questions from the audience of Roving Mike. But as I'm sitting here in the nice comfy chair, I'm going to have a question first, if you don't mind. That was an incredible journey that you've been on, and I remember reading the Bear Grylls book. I don't know if you read that one, where he breaks his back and he's sitting in hospital, and he has a picture of Everest, and he said, if I ever get out of this hospital bed, I'm going to climb Everest. And he did. I think he was the youngest man. I don't know if he's still the youngest man, but he was certainly at the time youngest man. And what was it about being in that, because you've obviously got an incredibly strong mental, ability. You can go beyond what you need to do to get the thing that you want to get done. But you came to that from quite a dark place by the sound of it. Mm. So at what point was it that you kind of transfixed from being something that was, you, as in your own words, you were depressed, you were kind of, thinking of taking your own life, and you attempted it. But then you had that mental strength now to do what you've achieved, and, probably looking at the next the first Scottish winner of the Tour de France.
So
what
is the question?
The question is,
like,
how did you get that mental strength?
Yeah,
How did you pivot from being from such a dull place to get that mental strength? At what point?
I think one of the great things about adversity and crashes and really tough negative stuff is that the more that you go through, I think you just get stronger every time. Like it's such a cliche, but like, I know people sit up and say this all the time. But it's like it's in the gym, you know, lifting the muscle. What happens? You break the muscle down, it comes back stronger.
Yeah.
I think that we operate under that same intelligence, which is every time you go through something difficult and negative, you don't just come back to where you were. You come back and you come back stronger. And so, for me, one of the good things about being in hospital the second time was I just had I love case studies and I love reference points, and I know that if I've done that before, I can do it again. And so to come through all those injuries in America, when I'm sitting in the hospital bed in Dubai, I'm thinking to myself, right, I can come through this, I've done it before.
Yeah.
It's just the more the things you go through, and I think for me as well, a question that I've kind of always lived my life by is, I've always lived my life like a book. Like, I don't know why, but I've just always lived my life like, because I've always knew I was going to write a book.
Yeah.
Because it's just such a cinematic sort of story and journey.
Yeah.
And at key moments I always think to myself, you know, what's the next chapter? That's how I live my life. And I remember there was a key moment for me just before I cycled around the world in 2019 where I was about to give up on it and quit and walk away from it. And I was living in a hostel in Edinburgh, you know, I quite liked hostels because I met other travellers and stuff like that. And I remember sitting there thinking, right, I'll just go and get a job in this hostel. Like, that'll be my thing. I'll just quit cycling in the world, get a job in the hostel, live in here and be happy.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting in the reception about to walk up and ask for a job. And I remember thinking, is that the final chapter of this book? And I thought, that's not the final chapter. Like, you don't try and cycle around the world 6 times and then go get a job in a hostel. Like, you go and finish the cycle around the world or try your best. And I've always lived my life. And so in hospital in Dubai as well, I'm sitting thinking, is that the final chapter of this book? I come through such a big, impactful crash in America. Yeah. Then I fall off my bike going down a hill in Dubai, and that's the one that ends me. Yeah. No, that's not the end of the story. No. Yeah.
And so, Hannah, you were nodding through some of that as well. You've obviously can resonate with some of those things with the injuries, and you know you've always got another chapter coming, which is great. So we'll go to the audience now for some questions, and those of you that are watching on YouTube, you can post your questions in the chat function, and they'll come through to me on my iPad, and I can share them with Josh, and hopefully he can answer some of those. So, any questions in the room? Please put your hand up and Graham will come with the roving mic. If you'd like to just say your name and then speak into the mic and ask Josh a question.
Oh, right, okay. Hi, my name is Julian. I'm studying digital marketing here at RGU. The question that I have, I suppose, for you is that you talked a lot about your limiting beliefs that you had prior to successfully managing to get on the bike in a more sort of productive way. What were those limiting beliefs, do you think? And do you think, so my question is split into 3. What do you think those limiting beliefs were? Do you think that those limiting beliefs were related to the way that you were perceived by others? And how did you overcome that?
That's a great question. I could stand up here and tell you a story about how, you know, I started cycling because I was depressed and wanted to feel better. And that along the way, this journey, racing and competing and records came along the way, but it's always been there. And so, see, when I go back through my diaries of the first time I quit the round the world cycle, you know, the diary the day before I quit basically says, you know, I never got into this because I wanted to cycle, but you know, I'm starting to really get into cycling. I could see myself one day competing and want to race and do things like that and go to the Olympics, blah blah. The next day I quit and went home. To me, looking back on that, and there's like 3 or 4 versions of that story that happened every time I quit cycling around the world, which was I kept getting closer and closer and closer to my true path and what I was on this planet to do. That's how I see it. But it's scary, really scary. And so there was always the fear of doing that. You know, it's easier to just play it small and to go home and not do what I was supposed to do. And think going back to that hospital chapel as well, like this journey essentially started with me sitting in that chapel saying, you know, who am I and why am I here? And I found out the answer to that. And so I think the limiting beliefs were almost, it was less about limiting beliefs and more about fear. It was my own fear. And I think that the best quote to describe that is that one that's in, what's the book? It's based on A Course in Miracles, which is, our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate, it's that we're more powerful than we can ever imagine, something like that. That's the fear. It's not a fear of failure, it's a fear of greatness, because greatness is scary. Greatness requires you to go out of your comfort zone. It requires you to stand up in front of thousands and millions of people and do your thing. And that's scary. So I think that was always the fear. I think I always knew the level I could get to, and that was what I was scared of.
That's a good lesson for entrepreneurs, that. Graham, there's another one at the back there.
Thank you so much, Josh, for your inspiring story. And my question, I think it has been answered, but I will ask it in another way. Was it really a fear that stopped you from, achieving your dream in the 6th attempt you said to cycle goal? Was it really a fear, or there is another things apart from fear? Then secondly, will you mind sharing us a tip about your next chapter in the book? Apart from now that you have achieved this, so do you have any other, adventure that you said to, take again? Thank you.
So the first question was, what was the fear?
Yeah, was it really a fear or
Yeah.
other things that achieving your dream in the past 6 months?
It was on the last time that I quit, the 6th time that I quit, I was in Amsterdam, and I was there to do basically a ayahuasca ceremony, right? On that ceremony, I seen a vision of me climbing up the Alps on a bike, like at the Tour de France, and it freaked me out big time, because I'd never ever really thought about that. That to me is essentially fear. It was, I've seen my path, I know what it is, but it's scary. It's a scary thing. Like, it would be so easy for me to just go and get that job in the hostel and not take myself out of my comfort zone and just be happy. But it's not why I'm here. And I think that sometimes to do the thing you're actually here for takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of heart. And there's going to be a lot of painful moments, but at the end of the day, like, that's just why I'm here. And so I just need to fight through that fear, essentially, I think. And the second question was, well, what's next? Yeah. For me now, what's next? Like, I've got a big dream and a big goal, and I'm still a long way from that. So for me, like, I've been doing ultra endurance the last couple of years, which is a lot of just big miles and riding like 2,000 miles in a week. For me now, it's more about racing, it's more about competing. It's a totally different type of training, it's a totally different type of cycling. So it's about adapting my training first and foremost to get up to speed with that, and also to start racing and start competing and start learning. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I actually had my first race yesterday and got absolutely destroyed. It doesn't help that I had 3 weeks off the bike after this, and I was living on sticky toffee pudding and ice cream. But still, I got absolutely wiped the floor with. And that, to me, as it was happening yesterday, I was sort of conscious. And the thing that got me through that race yesterday was just thinking about, I think there's a book from the start until now with that. Yeah. That's the final chapter. And I think there's a next book. That book, I'd call that Journey to Champion. Like, that was a journey from starting to getting a world record and becoming a record-breaking athlete. I think the next book's called Journey to Yellow, and the first chapter is me getting absolutely hammered in that race yesterday. And the story I've gone for the guy that got hammered in his first race, and used that as fuel to one day go and beat all these guys and get his revenge and go all the way to the top. That's how I see life, and like, everything's books and movies, and I'm a cinematic guy.
It's a great analogy.
So that's what's next for me. I've climbed to the top of the mountain of ultra endurance, like that 2,000 miles in a week. There's nobody done it. So now I'm back down at the bottom again, trying to go do the same with road racing. It's, the ultra endurance stuff is my comfort zone now. Like, I could go and do more records next year and just pile up loads of world records, but it's never going to fulfill me because I know I can do that. It's, riding 200-300 miles in a day or 2,000 miles a week does not scare me anymore. But road racing, what I done yesterday, terrifies me. I was so scared before yesterday, and I think the things that scare you in life are the things you should be doing. And so that's my path going forward.
That's so interesting. Graham, would you mind giving the mic to Hannah, because there's a question that's come in, and I think it would be really interesting to you, because we've got two incredible athletes in the room, and I think the question here is from Archam, who asks about how do you become so kind of disciplined You know, I remember you telling the story. So Hannah's done a masterclass for us before, which you can go and watch online, by the way. It was very inspirational. She talked about her journey, and I've seen you speak previously at award ceremonies. But, you know, getting up every morning and going swimming and doing the lengths in the swimming pool. So the question is, how do you become so disciplined? Are there any tips for somebody that wants to be, you know, that kind of athlete? And I'll ask you the same, Josh, as well. Yeah.
I definitely think it's about having that dream, that end goal, something to work towards. It's like that sense of purpose that I think drives you. So, you know, when you're waking up at like 4:30 in the morning and it's pitch black outside, snowing, hailing, sleet and everything, you know there's a reason why you're getting up. Also routine as well. And I guess each individual person's, you know, going to be different with what their motivation and their stimulus for that motivation is. For me, I live off routine. I love knowing what's coming up and then being able to face the challenges as they come. But I definitely think it's having that goal, that end game is that reason why you're wanting to strive for it, and then breaking it down into those manageable steps. I became a little bit lost going through COVID. When March 2020 kind of hit, I was suffering quite a lot with my shoulder. My shoulder fell off. Didn't literally, but it was partially dislocating as well. So during lockdown, we weren't allowed in the water, and I envied those who were out on the bikes, out in the roads running, and because as a swimmer, there's only so much you can do in a bath. And I just wanted to be in that water, and it really literally did feel like a fish out of water. And I was just like, well, I'm supposed to be trying to go for my 4th Olympics, and I've got this injury and I can't get in and swim, and the 3-4 years that I'd built, you know, up to that point was just disappearing. Yeah. And it was really, really demotivating. So it was like, right, okay, are the Olympics going ahead? Aren't they? And you know that training is just not going to be the same. And then when it was delayed, you think, right, okay, there's a reason for it being delayed. You know, I can try and see it in a positive light. It gives me more time. And then I found out that my one of my rotator cuffs had basically torn in half. And that was another thing that I just thought it's not going to be the same. So opting to have the surgery done, my goalpost changed, because the goal and the dream to get that 4th Olympics was still very much there, but it was so far away. I still had that dream, so going through the rehab still allowed me to keep going for it. And I definitely think I went through my rehab a lot better because I still had that driving factor. Even though I knew my chances of making that 4th Games were very, very slim, it still drove me forwards. Yeah. So definitely the dream in the end game is definitely kind of the main thing.
And how old were you when you first had the dream that you wanted to be an Olympic swimmer?
I remember watching the Sydney Olympics when I was 10. I was sitting in the living room with my dad. He was obsessed with swimming, and I didn't really take it on as much. I was much too interested playing with like my toys, and just swimming was just something that my dad did. But I remember watching this one swimmer, Misty Hyman, and you know, you see the big pool, 10 lane, 50 meters. It looks massive on TV. Everybody comes out. They've all got like their game face on, looking so serious. Yeah. And she was the one person that had this massive grin on her face. She was waving to the crowd, looked so relaxed and happy. And I thought, she looks really like she just wants to be there. And then, spoiler alert, she ends up winning the gold medal. And it wasn't necessarily the fact that she won it. She looked so shocked and surprised that I didn't think she expected it. Yeah. But she loved what she did. And for me, I just thought, if you could find something that you truly fall in love with and enjoy doing. Yeah. They say, a job's not a job if you enjoy it. I can't remember you don't have to work a day in your life. Yes, that was it. Yes. So, and I felt, I want to get to that point. Yeah. And I'd love to be able to do that at an Olympic Games and get to that point. And I was, I'm a small swimmer. I was always the underdog, so I always enjoyed that fight of being able to prove people wrong and coming from being the underdog. Yeah. So it was pretty much from 10, but I never thought I'd actually get to it. It was a dream that it was there. Yeah. But I guess I unintentionally just kept going for it. And the more I realized that my potential was there, it just kind of drove me more and more. And the fire for it just got more and more as I got older.
That sounds similar to yourself as well, John. Yeah. But so you were quite young when you wanted to be an Olympic swimmer, but how old were you when you saw Chris Hoy?
Yeah, I was like 24, so
24.
I think.
And had you done much cycling prior to that?
No, none.
Not at all? No. Wow.
I was just like a wee boy riding about on a bike, but nothing at all. Oh. I think for me, why I felt quite lucky in certain ways is that I think, there's always been part of me, and I try not to think like this, it's like always something's bothered me, like, And I think, like, imagine how good I'd be if I started when I was like 5. And it annoys me.
Yeah.
Like, you know those kids that just
Yeah.
go right through.
Yeah.
And like, for someone like yourself, like, just done it your whole life. I'd like, if I've done this at like in my mid-20s, like, imagine where I'd be if I started when I was 5. So
Yeah.
it kind of annoys me. So I try not to think like that. And one of the things that does, I think, has been helpful for me is coming to it late. I never went through it as a kid, so I kind of came into it from a fresh set of eyes.
Yeah, yeah.
And because I was an entrepreneur growing up, one of the things that I like about being an athlete is it's not easy, but I think it's simple. And I'll explain what I mean by that. As an athlete to succeed, I think there's only maybe a handful of things you actually need to do well, which is like training, nutrition, sleep, recovery, like looking after your body, stretching, right? See if you look at those 5 things, and obviously maybe like a team and stuff and that as well, and sponsors and stuff, but see those like 5 things, you just need to master those things. And so for me, what I like about that is when I wake up every day, I think, right, train, nutrition, sleep, recover, like that's all I need to do. And I think that's me done my work for the day. Whereas that's how I think. As an entrepreneur, there is a million things you need to do each day, and it never stops. Like, you can do business development literally 24/7, and you always feel like you need to keep doing that. Whereas for me, see, once I go train, eat, sleep, I'm like, all right, cool, just chill. that is the work for today done. Right. There's nothing more I can possibly do. Like, there's only so much you can stretch, and once you've done it, see, if you've trained, ate well,
That's great.
get to bed early, and you've stretched your body for at least an hour, there's literally like that's 80 to 90% of it. So I feel quite disciplined in that regard, as I always feel like just get those things done, then you can do whatever you want for the rest of the day.
Brilliant. So there's a good tip for you, Artyom, if you're watching. So just some other, there's another question in the room, I think, if we put your hands up. But there's some comments coming in from RGU Union. Congratulations, Josh, on your nomination for the Outstanding Achievement Award following your incredible Guinness World Record. It's inspiring to listen to you tonight. Sarah Sanger, wow, really inspiring. Azubuki loves your quotes. Truly, greatness is scary. So that's great. Thank you for that. We had a question in the room.
Yeah. Thank you, Josh. That's a pretty inspiring story. Superhuman it is, really. My name is Tiwa. I'm MSc Business Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Well, my own question comes from how you've been able to walk through the fact that as a child, 10, you've always been an entrepreneur at heart. And that molded you till you were 24. Do you have any regrets as to you following a path up until you're 24? Because you mentioned your business cycle in high school, studied business in the university, started a business at in your second, third year in university, and then at 24, you seemingly left everything and just faced a new chapter. Now, do you have any regrets in that area? 1, and 2, in cycling, has your entrepreneurial mind played any role in you being what you are today?
Yeah, so there is things that I definitely regret, but like I try not to regret them, because I'm quite a man of faith these days. Like, faith is important to me, spirituality is important. So I genuinely believe that everything happened the way it was supposed to, and for the rest of my life, everything's going to unfold the way it's supposed to. And what happened recently up here with getting this record just gave me so much more faith, because the way it unfolded was perfect, and this whole year, everything, all the events, was just, if you're going to write a story, it was perfect the way it all played out. So I've got so much faith and try not to regret things. There is sometimes, like as I touched on earlier, I think to myself, like I wish I could just go back and just, not get into football when I was a kid, and not start drinking when I was 12, and not be a wee idiot basically, and just cycle all the way through high school, and I think how good I'd be right now. But something that I think is important is that, like, if I'd done that, I might be an even better athlete, but I wouldn't have the story I've got right now. And I think that if you think about why all this happened, if it's coming from a place of faith, is this just so I can get a lot of glory for being a good cyclist? I don't think that's the reason. I think that my journey, my story, has impacted a lot of people because of all that stuff. Like, I didn't get into cycling when I was 5, and then went and done all that, and that's still a great achievement story, but it's more because I think it gives a lot of people that have been in similar places to me, been depression, anxiety, feeling suicidal, it gives a lot of people that now hope that you can go on to do great things and you can transform your life. And I think without all that stuff in the past, I wouldn't be here. So I think it was all meant to play out the way it did, and I don't regret any of it. In the second, yeah. Yeah, because so I'm lucky to now be a full-time athlete. I just can train all day, every day. I've got sponsors and stuff like that, so I don't have to go and work a real job, which helps with training and stuff like that. And that never came because I got this world record. I've had that for like a couple of years now. Even when I was just like, if you were to compare where I was physically, like I'm just like not even like a club rider. Like I'm just so amateur, it's unbelievable. But I always had a good business and marketing head on me, and I was always able to market myself essentially and to tell a story. And I never marketed myself as a superhuman, amazing athlete. It was a guy on a journey who was trying to figure it out, and people followed online because they connected and related to the story. 90% of people that follow me online don't like cycling, which is weird because that's all I do. It's weird, and people will they could explain it more than me, but my journey's not really a cycling journey, it's a human journey. It's a great story, it's an underdog story. And even what we've done up here recently in Aberdeenshire, it looks like we've done a world record attempt, but we created it was almost like a cultural moment. It was like a week-long event where people were coming out. Guys were telling me that, I've spoke to my neighbours more this week than I have in the last 10 years. Like, that's the legacy and the impact of this world record, not this shiny certificate. And so I think I've always been aware of that side of things, and I've always been able to tell a good story, and I was aware of the narrative. And so having that business and entrepreneurial stuff, I knew how important the social media was, putting out content, telling the story, attracting fans and an audience, and that's what allowed me to attract sponsors and get speaking opportunities and that sort of stuff. And that stuff comes natural to me. But there's like a lot better cyclists than me in Scotland right now, but they've not posted anything on Instagram in 2 years. And that's not a criticism, it's just a lot of athletes are quite introverted and they're just not comfortable doing that. So it's a balance, it's tricky. But in this day and age, a lot of cyclists now are reliant on getting a team to sponsor them and sign them. If I don't get signed by a team, I can still eat. I'm independent, and my sponsor that I work with, they're amazing. They sponsor me because they know the impact I can have on other people. They'll still sponsor me whether I set a Guinness World Record or I come third last in my race like I did yesterday, and they'll still be happy. And that's a good place to be. So people need to be aware of the business side of things as well. As it's not enough to just be a good athlete anymore if you want to make it, I think.
Any other questions in the room? Otherwise, you're just going over to that there, Graham. I've got one just about. It's quite solitary pastime or kind of activity, cycling. But you have a team around you, I guess. Tell us a little bit about the team that you have.
Yeah, so I accidentally built a team. It wasn't intentional. Like last summer, I was just at the time, come off the round the world. I was just down around the world on my own, self-supported. I had sponsors and stuff, but I'm on the ground on my own. I got a guy called Thomas Haywood who messaged me say, I'm a photographer, I want to do some photos with you. I was like, great, come and join me to do some photos. A guy called Paul messaged, said, I kind of want to support you. He came out. A girl called India, she messaged, said, I want to kind of support you. So we had this wee team of 4 people, and we went up and done the North Coast 500 record. So we had this wee team of 4. This year we decided to go for the 7-day record and thought, right, we need a few more people. Recruited a few more, and it just accidentally just got bigger and bigger, to the point now where I've got a team of about 20 people around me. We had 10 people on the ground for this one up here in Aberdeenshire. And it's funny for me because in a lot of ways I can still remember being the guy riding across the desert in Kazakhstan trying to fix punctures on his own. And I've now got like a physio, nutritionist, mobile mechanic. I've even got my own weather person. It's crazy. Like we got a message just before the record attempt from a woman that works in the Met office. She said, like what you do, I'm a weather forecaster, I want to help you. So she was giving us these like personal, detailed weather reports, and it's just so cool. And but this is a team achievement. Like although I could cycle in the world on my own, like if I was to attempt that on my own, I might have done. I reckon I could have done maybe 250 miles a day at the most, which doesn't get me anywhere near the record. So the team's really important.
Yeah, great. Question from the audience.
personal question coming from personal interest. So my name is Lisa, and as you said, you want to ride down the Champs-Élysées one day in a yellow jersey. Of course, it takes a massive personal effort, but also team effort. So if you would have to choose 3 riders that you admire the most to ride you down the Tour de France and the Champs-Élysées, which 3 riders would you choose that inspire you?
I'm inspired by people that have got a similar journey to me. And so my number 1 is Primož Roglič, because he had his first bike race in 2013. In 2018, he won a stage of the Tour. He's now Olympic champion, won 3 Grand Tours. So I like case studies and reference points. If he can do it, I can do it. And if I think about where I'm at now to where he was in 2013, I think I've got to be at least on a similar level or above, given what I've done. So he's probably my first one. That's probably it. I would just say him. That's like I'm not a massive like cycling geek. Know all the guys and stuff. That's my path. And Roglič is just, as in terms of inspiration, like he's my guy. Like the other ones I'd pick probably wouldn't make sense. Probably get me in trouble. You know, I'd probably pick Lance. You know, I just like Lance, and I'm not supposed to say that, but I relate to him in a lot of ways. The mindset is just such drive. Like I think a lot of people like to throw Lance away as if there's nothing to learn from him. I don't think there's anybody you could learn more from in road cycling than him. So I'd probably pick him. And I liked Bradley Wiggins as well. Like I like the champions. I like the people that were the greatest. Like that's the ones I study. And the ones that became the greatest champions were never the most technical, never the most detailed. They couldn't tell you about the gear ratios like me, but they were a bit mental. They were. The greatest champions were all just a bit crazy, a bit mental. Graham O'Brien, Bradley Wiggins, they all had something about them. And I've got that thing, and I think that's why I'm going to get there, just because I've got the drive and the intention, and I'm just a wee bit crazy as well.
I think we've got time for one more question. Anyone got a question?
So, like, obviously, you talked about your mental health, and I'm assuming now the bad days are few and far between. But when they do arise, because, you know, we're all human, how do you cope with them? How do you give yourself self-compassion? How do you, you know, like, do you just indulge in Netflix? What is the kind of thing that you use to, deal with the bad moments?
She's sitting up there at the back. My beautiful fiance Megan. She's these days she's my rock. She's the thing that makes me happy. In the last couple of years, the interesting thing was I started cycling because I was depressed and wanted to feel better, and then it started at work because I was just riding a bike around Europe. Didn't care about speed, numbers, targets. I then got to a point where I got serious about it, passionate about it, and then get to a place where I was depressed because I do bad sessions. You know what I mean? It was like I started to get away from that, and then that's the thing that stressed me out the most. So for me, that is like cycling's just such a big thing in my life, and so I'm usually really happy when my cycling's going well, and when it's not, that's when I struggle. Like the last 3 weeks, I've just been like in a dreamland because I'm walking around with that, and it's all just kind of paid off and worked out this year. But I think, you know, talking about team and stuff like that, for the last few years, I have just been quite lonely and isolated as well. And you know, I met Megan like 6 months ago, and we've just been so full on for the last 6 months. And yeah, I never had anything other than cycling to be happy about, because cycling was just the only thing in my life. Like when I stopped drinking a few years ago, I kind of lost contact with most of my old friends just because we're just living different lives. You know, they were going out at the weekend. I wasn't wanting to do that, so it just wasn't working anymore. So I never really replaced those relationships. So I was quite lonely, quite isolated. But now, you know, having Megan is just a big part of that as well. And you know, I think for me, what's important as well is that usually I can really pinpoint whether I'm happy or not, and a lot of it's related to my habits as well. Like, see, when I'm training, eating well, getting to bed early, not sitting on my phone too long, looking at stupid things, I'm genuinely happy. See, when I'm not training, eating crap, on my phone all the time, watching too much TV, I genuinely feel bad. So I try to just put in the work as well. And sometimes you just accept you're not going to feel good, but I genuinely feel happy most of the time these days. And if I'm not, it's because my numbers are bad. And Harry can relate to that, I'm sure.
Did I read somewhere that you proposed on the day that you got there?
Yeah. So I'd kind of decided going into the record attempt that if I'd got it, I was going to propose to Megan. But I didn't want to jinx it because of the first one and stuff like that. So on the way back to the ceremony with the judge at Braemar Highland Games Centre, I got the support team to stop at the jewellers and a boy, and went and got a wee ring. It was like 50 quid, you know. It didn't even fit her. It was a prop to propose. She very, I don't know why, but she said yes. And then once we got back home, we went to a proper jewellers and I got her one. So yeah, I've got this area up here has became a very special area to me. Doing it up here, you know, we're going to get married up here. We're going to get at Mary Court House, which is where we stayed. I'm actually planning the night before and riding from Ballater to the hotel in the morning.
Fantastic.
I'm going to get the live tracker on the go again, so the people can come out and follow and support. Megan's still to approve this.
We'll get a tandem.
But that is essentially the plan.
No.
Yeah, no, just.
You don't cycle, no? No.
I think I'd do enough miles for the both of us. No, I'll give a final just shout out to, like, this area has become so special to me, you know, the D-side in Aberdeenshire. You know, we came up here because one of the guys in my team is based up here and he suggested the route. You know, the amount of support I've got up here now is just incredible. And so yeah, just thanks to all the guys that were following, supporting. I know there was lots of you, and you know, met some of you tonight as well. So
that's fantastic. Yeah. No, well, we'd love having you here, and you know, your story, what you bring to the region as well, has just been amazing. And so we're very proud of you and of Hannah and of Ewan as well. And congratulations to you on your engagement. That's fantastic. Yeah. That's all we've got time for. I think we should say thank you very much and give a round of applause to Josh and to Hannah. I hope. Thanks very much. Hopefully there was a virtual round of applause as well from the people watching on YouTube. I hope you've been inspired by today's session. It's been fantastic. The way that Josh spoke there, and both Hannah and you. And so we thank you ever so much for sharing your stories with us. Very human stories as well, not just about business or sport or anything, very human stories. Thank you for joining us. That draws to an end our second masterclass of this 2021 session. We do have a third one coming up though very soon, and actually it's COP26, which we all have heard about, and it's Global Entrepreneurship Week as well. So that's on Monday the 8th of November, and it's same time, same place, and we're going to have Laurel and Aishel, mother and daughter team from Sustainably, talking about their journey and their business. So that's on Monday the 8th of November. Put that in your diaries. And that's it from us here live in Garthdee in Aberdeen. Thanks again to Josh. Thanks again to Ewan and Hannah. And we hope to see you next time for our Innovation Masterclass. Thank you very much and good night. Thank you. Are we clear, Edward?